Monotype.
Welcome to Creative Characters for Monotype, a show where we meet the people working at the intersection of type and everyday life. I'm your host, Cadley, and I'm here with my good friend, Bill. Hi, Bill. How are you doing?
I'm doing so well, Cadley, and I'm really excited to be back in the introduction chair with you. I feel like you and Carl had kicked me out, and I've been trying to find my way back in, and so it is so refreshing to be back here with you again.
Well, it's a good thing you bribed us. Yeah, that money didn't hurt, so glad to have you here.
You got to do what you got to do.
You're back on the team. So I'm excited about this week's episode. Can you tell me a little bit about who you spoke with?
I'm super excited about this week's episode. It's somebody I've been trying to get on the podcast for a while. So my guest this week is James DeJulio. And James is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Tongal. And Tongal calls itself a studio on demand. But essentially what they do is they partner with agencies, with brands, and really the most important piece is with a long tail of what I believe is about 160,000 creatives now to produce work for brand storytelling. Really, I think their special sauce is they'll work with a company like Lego, and instead of just hiring the traditional channels to get work done for Lego, they'll go find somebody who's obsessed with Legos to do the work. And so the result, their thesis really is that when people are really passionate about the brand, they're going to do their best creative work. And, James gets into a bit of his history. He comes from Hollywood and was running into walls trying to hire writers and producers that weren't on the quote, approved list from the studios. And he took that insight and he moved it into advertising and branded content really at a time when that was coming to bear, where brands were becoming editorial studios in some ways. And so it's been really an interesting journey for them. And the creatives that work with Tongal are really passionate about it. So I think our audience, this will be a little bit of a different episode, but James is a character, has a lot of good stories from his time in Hollywood too. And so I think the audience will enjoy it.
I do too. Thanks for hosting this week, and I'll hand it over to you and James for this week's episode.
Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of Creative Characters by Monotype. I am today's host, Bill Connolly, and I'm really excited today to be joined by our special Creative Characters guest, James DeJulio, who is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Tongal, which is based out in Los Angeles. James, welcome to the show.
Bill, thanks for having me. I'm really into the title. It's perfect.
Creative Characters?
Yeah, it's perfect.
I stole it from an old newsletter we had in another part of our business a long time ago, but now it's our podcast. This is fun. So, Tongal. I came to know Tongal it would have been probably 2018, and your office happened to be one block from my apartment in Santa Monica, California. We'll get into this a little bit, but I interviewed you for a book that I was writing, and I just became really in love with Tongal, with the ecosystem that you were building and the mission that you were on. Do you want to start by just telling our listeners a little bit about what Tongal is?
For sure. We're really building out a creator community that's capable of really good shit. Like we're really have been laser focused on building a talent network that can function, almost like a studio on demand, where different people are coming together to build different things. So what's been really interesting and exciting to me is what is the way that creative elements or people can bring themselves together to do things that are bigger than, what one person can do. And that's really been at the heart of all of it. So we've organized a very large creator community. Last we checked, it's over 160,000 members all over the world. And they're collaborating with sometimes brands, sometimes studios, sometimes just each other to build different types of storytelling. Most of that is production video based, but it extends into lots of creative formats. So we have tried to set out to build something that would be an open platform to bring opportunity to creative people all over the world.
James, something I loved about not just the ethos, the mission of Tongal, what you were doing, the creator community you were building, which we'll get into as well, but also the key insight that drove your kind of path to getting there and your personal experience, how you kind of took your experience in entertainment and used it to inform how you've gone about building Tongal with your team. I'd love to ask you a bit about that path. What kind of got you there?
How much time you got?
We got a lot of time, and it's really fascinating. And for our listeners, I would just say, I think it's a great story too of again following your instincts and looking for ways that existing models aren't really serving you. And so anyway, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
It's funny. There's like a philosopher who I can never remember the guy's name, and I always credit this to Joe Walsh because I heard the first time I heard Joe Walsh say it. But it's this idea that as your life is happening to you, everything's like colliding, and it feels like just total fucking chaos. Right? Like, you don't know why these things are happening, and like you meet somebody and that leads to, down one road. But as you get older and you turn around and look back, it's almost as if it had been like crafted by a novelist. Like all the plot points sort of fit together, and like this is the nature of, a life and how things come together. And the more gray hair I get and the more reflective I am, I kind of look back on my life and I say, wow, like, this all really did a lot, good, bad, ugly, whatever. It all did a lot to put me in this exact moment right here and like build this company. And in a lot of cases, it changed people's lives, which has been incredible. So it's hard to separate my personal story from the story of Tongal. Like, I grew up in Connecticut, and I was a kid who just loved movies. We had like one of those JVC, like, gigantic camcorders, and I used to like drag my sisters into the basement and force them to like reenact music videos and stuff like that. I mean, I remember we got HBO, and this was like when you got in the 80s, when you got HBO, it was like a whole world opened up to you. I just became someone who was obsessed with movies and entertainment, and I loved comedies, especially like from the 80s school of comedy. I always loved that. And you'd watch a movie, and I didn't really think the 300 people's names and the credits were actual people. Like it was just so far removed from anybody I knew. My dad sold raviolis. So it wasn't like we had access to, this sort of a thing. And so, I kind of went on my way and wound up going to college. And when I got to college, there was one filmmaking class, and it had a room for like 10 kids. And it was decided every semester who got in by lottery. So I really just never had the chance to put my hands on a lot of this stuff. So at some point I got through school, and, like a good late 90s college graduate, I got like a suit job. And I don't know what I was doing there. I don't know. It was a great suit job. Like my mother would go to cocktail parties or whatever and she could tell, everybody what her son was doing. But at some point, it just wasn't me. I didn't want to be anybody else there. Like, pay was good. I got to do cool stuff and all that. But I just like, I got to take a shot at something.
And at this point, James, because you went to Boston College, right?
I did.
Were you in Massachusetts with this suit job still? Were you in New York? Where were you at this time?
Yeah, I was in Manhattan. Yeah, I worked at Lehman Brothers.
Oh, wow. I've heard of it.
Which is its own story. Yeah.
It is its own story. Wow.
Which was fun. Like, I should stay away from like nonfiction, because every time I read a book, I'm like, that sounds pretty, like I literally read Liar's Poker and I was like, that seems like fun. I think I want to go do that. And, I got there, it wasn't really like Liar's Poker, but it had elements of that. And
I have that affliction as well. Every time I see a movie about any profession, I want to do that profession, or about a location, I want to live in that location. And then I have to remind myself, you're never going to do that.
So I just moved out here, and I couldn't believe how hard it was for me to get a job. Again, this is all, in a strange way, all part of the story, because I'm like, I'm ambitious, I'm young, I'm willing to work for, basically nothing, and I can't get a job anywhere. I like stretched my network as far as I could, and I couldn't get hired to get somebody coffee in Hollywood. So I was like, wow, this is really a closed system. It just can't accept new people unless you know somebody, unless you hit some other form of a lottery. But I was pretty determined, like I had to get in the door or whatever. So I sat around, and my roommate, Tongal co-founder Mark Burrell, had a Hollywood creative directory, and I just opened it up and I said, listen, who would I work for free? And I went through I made a list, like on a yellow pad and stuff, And the first name I landed at, because when I got to LA, everybody was obsessed with The Kid Stays in the Picture on audiobook, which I can't recommend enough. Book changed my life in a lot of ways, but it's the autobiography of legendary Hollywood producer, bad boy, ladies' man, Robert Evans. And if you haven't listened to it, I mean, the thing is, it is a perfect snapshot of why Hollywood is interesting and exciting and allows for, certain mavericks to really do their thing. So I was like, all right, well, I would work for this guy for free. I'm sort of semi-obsessed with this guy. And I called up the studio and they said, no way. So the second name on my list, interestingly enough, was Harold Ramis. When I was watching HBO as a kid, I was pretty obsessed with all the Ramis movies and that whole school of comedy. And they said yes. Drove to the Fox lot every day. It felt like show business for a while. And that's where I kind of learned, a little bit about the business, learned how to read scripts and do all that, do coverage and learn how the business worked a little bit. And then eventually, ironically, a job opened up at Paramount, and it was literally Robert Evans' assistant. And I somehow got that job, which, I remember seeing the stack of resumes of people who were way more qualified than I ever was or could be. And for whatever reason, it just worked out. I remember I met him by his pool, and he was wearing some awesome looking jogging suit. And literally, this is not made up. It's middle of the day. We're walking from his bedroom to his screening room, and there are literally two women skinny dipping in the pool. And I'm like, is this like a plant? Is this for real? I was like, what is going on here? This is just too weird. What am I doing? But somehow he loved me when I got the job. And that was, a trip, as they say. And so that was the way I really kind of got through the door in Hollywood. But we were thinking about how hard it was to actually get through the door. Not only do you need to be in a position where, you just got your Lehman Brothers bonus and you take that money and gamble it to move to Southern California and work for free, right? The system's pretty closed. System is closed.
Well, also, so the system is closed, but also the door is in Southern California. You have to go there to even have a chance at the door. Well, there's so many people who could have entered that lottery if only they could have made their way there. But that closed system was geographic as well.
And it's a really interesting point. Part of the ethos of our company and our mission is that we truly believe in the power of creativity inside of every person. Every person has access to infinite potential. And we believe that. We believe in the power of creativity. We believe that there's great ideas and great talent everywhere. So why would we want to keep a system that only allows people who won the lottery to be in it, right? Once I got to Paramount, that became my grad school, really, the way I look at it. I learned the business inside and out. I moved from being an assistant to an executive at the company, met everyone there was to meet, had a lot of fun, learned a whole hell of a lot. But at some point, the system itself was getting in the way. I was thinking about it the other day. There was a couple moments where we take a book and put that book into development, and then we go to find a writer for it. And the way that all studios still work is there's a small list of people that it's okay to work with, and those people are never available. And if you do get one of those people, unless they really love it, they're likely going to mail it in. So that's what they call development. That's the beginning, or the door to development hell. I remember getting the rights to a book. The book was just this dark, funny, awesome book. And a guy called me out of the blue and was like, this is my favorite book. I have the best take on it. I can adapt it. I'll do it for next to nothing. And I met with the guy, and he had a perfect take. And you just knew from his passion that he was going to do it. And studio wouldn't let me hire him because he had real credits. I mean,
he wasn't on the list.
He wasn't on the list, but he was writing. It's funny to look back on because he'd written a couple episodes of The Sopranos, and now that would be everything. But back then, nobody cared. If you hadn't written a feature, then you can't write a feature. It was whatever. And so that died. And then I remember it's funny. I had a flashback that there was a young up and coming pair of brothers director where we had this really great pitch with. Their names were the Russo brothers, and Paramount wouldn't hire the Russo brothers. In like 2006, they would not hire. I mean, like they were not. So look what happened there. Anyways, long story short, I was getting really frustrated. So I said, like, it's just time to go do something where it was set up for up and coming talent to get opportunities. That's really what lived under the surface of everything that I think I've done, which is I want to be the guy who gives everybody their break. That feels like good karma. So one thing led to another, and we had started a company called Half Shell Entertainment, where we went and we bought the rights to the National Lampoon Archive, and we're developing features out of that. But at some point still, I'm operating in a way which is outside the system, but then being reliant on the system to get anything done. So I was getting really frustrated, and that's where I ran into Jack Hughes, a successful technology entrepreneur in the first wave of the internet, and then had built a company called Topcoder. And Topcoder was a highly advanced community of software engineers. If you think doing really sophisticated work for literally repositioning satellites for NASA, building big, large-scale software development tools and everything. And this is like one of those things that starts over a beer and winds up becoming your life, and his point of view was he totally understood what I was looking to do. He said, if you can take elements of what I'm looking to do from community standpoints and take it and merge it with the idea that what you're trying to do, which is build a community of content creators and storytellers outside the system. He's like, well, then I'd write the first check. And that's it. That's where it started. And that's the path that got Tongal off the ground. And here we are.
I appreciate you sharing that part of the story. I think what's very interesting about it is that it kind of speaks to that point, that philosophy that you shared early on about how when you look back at your life, right, you can see how those things really kind of came together. And that's true of this partnership, the roadblocks you were facing in the entertainment industry, the fact that it also could be then extrapolated out. I mean, even within the entertainment industry, right, you look at entertainment now, the BuzzFeed model almost, where it's like, entertainment only needs to work for like 1% of the population. But if it really works for that 1%, it's fine. There's a channel for everybody now, and there's a series for everyone. And as a result, work is getting made, TV shows and features are getting made that would not have been made even 5, 10 years ago, right? But if you extrapolate that into advertising or content for brands, where brands are becoming editorial or have been over the past, I don't know, call it 15 years or what have you. The timing of all of that lined up really well with something that was also radically innovative on your side. That idea that, you didn't need to go to a production house in New York or Los Angeles to get great work done, that you could hire somebody who's just really passionate about it and happens to sit anywhere in the world.
It's almost like what's the word I'm looking for? Demonetization of the tools is really what has been going on. Meaning back at Paramount, for the cameras that everyone has access to now, $20,000 a day, right? So that's been a big factor in enabling that creativity that we saw at the center of all this. But when I think about brands, and this is all about the audience and all about the customer. Once the genie sort of got out of the lamp on mobility of an audience, the idea of genuinely your entire communication strategy being to interrupt people, that went out the window. People held on to that for so long, by the way, which is, the way that you build brand is to make really expensive 30-second films for TV and interrupt a sitcom or whatever. I get that still works on some level, but that's not the communication pattern of the current generation or of the future, right? So that sort of thing put so much pressure on brands to change how they were doing stuff. And that opened the door to our community and communities like ours to build their careers and produce this content and express themselves creatively.
Let's talk a bit about that, the community element and the creator economy. I mentioned before when we met, I was writing a book called Mindspace, How to Live a More Creative Life in the Age of Distraction. I had to look at the title. I forgot what it was, but available on Amazon. Quick plug there. But anyway, James was a great case study in that book. And something you said to me, and this would have been in 2019, you predicted that creators would increasingly become their own brands, that people would subscribe directly to creators, and that instead of just having endorsement deals with brands, creators would be their own brands. Of course, some of that was already happening. I think we had talked about comedy specials, Jim Gaffigan and others like streaming directly on their own websites. But it's exploded since the time we had that conversation, largely throughout the COVID era, the digital era that followed it, right? I've always thought about that conversation. What are the things that made you realize that was going to happen? And where do you see that continuing to evolve?
Well, listen, I just want to say that I love any conversation that starts off with, James, you predicted this.
Yeah.
That doesn't always happen. Usually it's like, James, what the hell are you doing? But no, I'll take that. Just the ability to get direct to an audience seemed to me like it was the big change. It's hard to even wrap your head around how connected people are to their audience now. Think about like 30, 40 years ago. There was just no way to get in front of an audience without a vast series of middlemen. I even think about the difference between the function of a studio or network is now compared to what it was when I started in the business. And it's getting more and more like the studio is marketing and finance, and the stuff is all made by creators. So if it's marketing and finance and distribution, as you look to the future, I kind of feel like there's other ways to do marketing, finance, and distribution as the future unfolds itself. So a lot of it was just me thinking through where the middlemen are. So just thinking if the creator could begin to monetize themselves, that would be them acting in their best interest, always. There is this little thing that's always prohibited that, which is that people want to be paid mostly up front. So that's why you don't see everybody going down that road right now. And if you're at the top of the pyramid and you're in that system, then you'll take the millions of dollars to go and just do things the traditional way. But I think we're seeing right now the economic model of all that is failing, like before our eyes.
And what's contributing to that, do you think?
It can all circle back to the same, I think, underlying realization behind Tongal, which is people weren't going to consume content in any way that was even a reminder of how they used to in the future, but everybody still makes the stuff the way they did 100 years ago. So meaning...
Right, they're taking a 30-second commercial and just putting it on social media as opposed to creating stuff that was optimized for the new ways of consumption of media.
Right, because it's really hard to do without a net. Like you think about it, you have like an exponential demand for content, right? So you have a non-linear growth in content, and it's happened in every level, but then you have a very linear system for making that stuff. At some point, it's going to break down. And so if you even think about it at the highest level, which I would categorize as, Disney Plus burning multiple billions of dollars to do what they're doing, or Netflix $20 billion in debt to finance content, the economics don't level out anymore, right? So we're at this point, which is really interesting to me, which is the creation economics don't match the revenue opportunity, right? And that's all because it just costs too much money to do anything. So if it costs too much money to make entertainment product, the brand product that's going to follow that's going to cost too much money. All of the systems around that are going to be exposed at some point. So to me, this is the biggest opportunity for the creator ever, because the creator, as you said earlier, can own the audience. The creator can now, with tools like Tongal, build the product, distribute the product, own the revenue stream. Everybody wants to talk about Mr. Beast, but think about, and that's at the most extreme scale, but there could be millions of Mr. Beasts out there. Right. As you said, there's an audience for everything. The internet's really good at audiences collecting themselves, and you're just going to find that the future lies right there.
Let's talk a little bit about community. I do want to speak about that because, you take brands that are looking to create content, original programming in some cases for their editorial system, or in some cases advertisements or what would be used advertisements, what have you. You mirror that to people who are in love with those brands, or at least have really unique, fresh takes with those brands, right? But may happen to sit anywhere, be at differentiated levels of their careers or what have you. But the community of Tongal is always what has made it stand out. The Tongi Awards that you produce around the best work of the year. And I think, as you mentioned, up to over 160,000 professionals. What have been the keys to building that strong of a community? And what has that enabled, or how has that helped Tongal to differentiate itself?
Yeah. It sounds ridiculous, but we really give a shit about our community. It's funny because like when a model like Tongal appeared, it's almost like reactions to AI or whatever. When a model like Tongal appeared, it was like, oh my God, this is devaluing creative work. But the reality of that all was that this change was inevitable. The creator is going to be everything. The creator is going to do work on their own terms. And that was really hard for people who had gone through a system to say, oh, I'm going to, like I did. If I broke down the door, I paid my dues, I'm in here. So it becomes very threatening. But the big thing that, to a fault, we give a shit about our community. Our mission is to let everybody unlock their potential. It really is. I mean, and a lot of businesses say that, and it's just the ones that mean it are going to stick around because that's a really important place to be. And so, even in the early days and before anybody was getting paid, our community was getting paid. Like our marketing strategy in the early days was because people didn't think it was real.
Too good to be true.
Too good to be true. Did I just get $10,000 to make a goofy Banaka video? Awesome. But that afternoon, just writing out a check and getting it in the mail as fast as possible was really a priority to build confidence and trust within a community. And that's taken, more than 10 years to do. So really like elevating the community members, elevating their careers. And we've done a lot to make it sustainable for people. People love the idea of cohort analyses, especially if you're like in the venture capital business or whatever. We've done a bunch of cohort analyses on our community. And people who were the early members of Tongal, like as a cohort, are still earning, whether it's for fun or if it's for their living or if it's supplementing some other endeavors. It's just great to see that people stick around. So I think, all communities have people who are extremely active members of those communities. And so by constantly rewarding them and elevating them and doing that sort of thing, it has this really positive outreaching effect.
Do you feel as though you're at the precipice, and this kind of transitions into the last area that I want to ask you about, which is the future, both I think for Tongal as an organization, but also of the creator economy, if you will, right? We've started to talk more about the democratization of design, and we're starting to see a lot of these places where creative work gets done. I think you alluded to it as well, as the cost of tools, the access of tools. Think about like low code, no code design, where people who aren't as technically savvy now are able to create as well. I think I saw a stat the other day. It was like 300 million people are posting content online now, every year. It's kind of mind-boggling, and the access is only going to get broader, right, and cheaper and more user intuitive, right? Do you feel as though, and so that leads to my question of, do you feel as though Tongal's at this precipice where like you were ahead of the game? Yes, there was like a lot of adoption and you've had a lot of success with that. How do you transition that into now the whole world is there? Now the whole world is ready for creator economy, is seeing the benefit of it, is leaning into it. What does that mean for your business, the way you think about it?
We're so early into all this. It's just crazy to even think about, right? And there weren't words for what we were doing. Saying things like, we got a creator community. It's decentralized. No one got that. Now that that's, as you said, now that those words are pretty well understood and implemented into the world, it makes me think we're really only in the top of the first on this thing. It just feels very, very early into all of that and what's possible. So from the Tongal standpoint, we couldn't be better positioned for all this. It takes a long time to figure out how to do this stuff. It takes a long time to build the trust of a community and have it really operate. So I'm actually just thrilled of what could possibly happen now. Going back to the Joe Walsh thing, wow, these pieces really are coming together in an interesting way at an interesting time.
It is. It's a fascinating time. If you think about democratizing creativity, the flip side of that being how cyclical it is, right? You start in entertainment, it's a closed system. I find that fascinating how you move into the advertising world, the kind of brand world, break that up, and that changes the way things happen. Consumers become creators. That puts pressure back on entertainment. Those models now change as well. And you're seeing entertainment that's being created, as I mentioned, that would never have been created before, that's winning all these awards and having a huge following, even though it's not for everybody, it's for specific audiences. But the people who were making the selections of what was getting created 20 years ago was so homogenous that it wasn't percolating down into stuff that made sense for everybody. That's happening for brands, it's happening in entertainment, and it's happening at the individual level. Like you said, it does feel like it's at the top of the first, but we don't know if it's a 9-inning game. We don't know where it goes or what happens next or what manifestations, it might take.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to extra innings too. I think you're right. I mean, look, we're getting to a world, I think, where the tools are going to be able to organize themselves for you to be able to implement your creative ideas, which is really interesting, right? If you think about what I was saying earlier, which was, okay, I'm going to go try to build this Tongal thing. And I don't have any of the personal ability to go do that. I don't have any of the capital it would have taken in a traditional system to do that back in 2009. But because there was an online community of software engineers organized for me, I was able to do that. Now, fast forward to the point where a creator having tools at their disposal and other community. I mean, to me, I don't even know where I'm landing on the whole AI thing. Sometimes I'm thinking,
I was going to ask.
Sometimes I'm like, to the extent that it becomes a partner to a creative person, I really like it. To the extent that people are trying to sit there and have Chat GPT write songs for them, I don't. Right. So I think that's about intention. Are you doing it for me or doing it with me? In the with, I think that's really interesting. But if you think through the idea that if you look at a network like Tongal and tools like that we've built, and you fast forward it and you say, I'm thinking about a future where if I wanted to see a documentary about whatever esoteric topic I'm interested in this week, the ability to organize the people to tell that story with you, to build that and find if there's an audience for it and actually go out and do it. And that the people who do it and the people who are the audience for it own the economic rights in it. That's actually reasonably possible. And man, if that's not exciting, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is. It's transformational. It's
possible and transformational. Yeah.
You used to say that like anybody with a good idea could contribute. There are great ideas everywhere in Tongal, and that that could get you the root of a funny Banaka video or whatever. But you start to combine all those elements, all those people that need to come together to do something, but you have a real economic engine behind it. That's where this is going to get crazy.
So, as you look at this next era of the creator economy, what are the skills that will be required for people who are looking to be successful in this next era? Maybe young up and coming, but also more seasoned people who are transitioning into this new paradigm, right? I think somebody said AI will be the fourth industrial revolution, right? However that is, whatever that actually turns into. But what are the skills required for people who want to participate and be successful in this next paradigm of creativity?
It's a really good question. There's a couple ways probably to answer it. To me, the honest answer is the same things that made somebody successful in any other era, right? Open-mindedness, flexibility, determination. Tom Cruise did this acceptance speech at the PGA Awards.
Oh yeah, I saw that circulating on like LinkedIn or something. I need to watch it.
And it's like, this guy was going to be the biggest movie star in the world. He made that decision. Right. And if you listen to his story, he does the work. He's determined. He's open. He wants to learn from other people. He's grateful for people that help him along the way. And he surrounds himself with the best. So I don't know how that's any different in the age of the future. I mean, skill specific things, of course, are going to be really important. I look through our business and yeah, the more that you can use a certain tool or more familiar with new technology, the probably more in demand you're going to be. A lot is happening with things like UE5, especially in the animation world, and to the extent that developers and animators are in a good place to work with those tools, they'll be more and more in demand. So there's always going to be that. Do you understand and can you work with the cutting edge tools? That's always going to change. So to me, the thing that's never changing is that Tom Cruise thing. It's just never going to change.
I agree with that. I think the things that make human beings great don't change, right? The application, that's where I come down on the AI stuff too. It's like the tools change. The tools don't change how humans behave, interact, are creative. We are inherently creative beings, like you said. Drawing that out, making the most of it, that is probably the best outcome that a tool can do if it could free us up to allow us to lean on more of what is innately human. That's for the best. But it's still at the end of the day going to be the things that have made us get to this stage, right? Which is what sets us apart from any other species, I suppose.
Yeah, well, this is all about unlocking like a better future, in my opinion. Whether you like it or not, humans are part of nature. And nature, to me, is the most sophisticated creative network there is, right? Constantly rebuilding itself and reforming. And, you're a part of that. So if you're not doing that, if you're not creating, and I don't know if you've read Rick Rubin's book.
I just said to my team yesterday, we're going to do a book club on it.
The Creative Act.
Yeah. We're gonna do a book club on it here at Monotype.
It would be a great book club. I was actually thinking about doing the same thing at Tongal. There's just so many interesting insights in it. It's pretty freeform and disassociated, but it's all these like very digestible sections on different parts of creativity and how to be an artist and all those things. And the interesting thing to me is that he also talks about the human innate need to create. And he's like, as humans create, there are these breakthroughs that can make insane amounts of people happy, right? And so I think he lists like Claire de Lune, or I forgot. I think he listed a great album, and he's like the Philadelphia cheesesteak. I thought that was the best part of the entire book, because it's like, yeah, the creative energy that it went in to invent the Philly cheesesteak, however it came to be, has made so many people happy for so long. And then you think about the creative act as the idea that you could invent a cheesesteak or write a song. Just think about how much positive repercussions something like that has. And like, that's what it's all about, man. I mean, that's what we're here for.
There's three things I've always loved about creativity. The more I've thought about it, studied it, what have you. One is that it is inherently human, that we are, the insight I had, the first thing was that 97% of children they think at a level consistent with creative genius. Only 3% of adults do, or we learn not to be creative, right? The second thing is that it's inherently vulnerable, that the creative act is an expression of yourself, your own identity. And so it's not as disassociative as other types of work. And the third is that there's always not just the potential for massive impact on others, but surprising impact on others. The way that once you put it out in the world, who knows what can come from it. I think all of that is just really fascinating. So, well, James, I really appreciate all of your insights. Is there anything else that you want our audience to know about, anything we didn't cover?
No, I think we covered a lot. I mean, I could go on for another hour, but I just hope that everybody, could really get a feel for what we're trying to achieve here. And we think it's bigger than us. And I'm really optimistic about the future. I really am.
That's another trait that I think will make people successful in the age to come, is optimism. There's plenty of, I think, pessimism around lots of stuff. But if you're not optimistic about what could be, then you won't have a role in making it better. Like we think about creativity, right? Or about productivity and stuff. It's like, how do we all work so that the gains that we get from this next age of AI or whatever are proportionately realized by everybody, whether you're a big brand or whether you're just an individual creator, right? To have some ownership of that. I think that's really critical. But anyway, yeah, you're right. We could go on another hour about this stuff. But for those listening, I would say just definitely go check out Tongal. We'll put some more detail in the show notes as well. But the work that the creators do and that Tongal enables is really amazing. It's fun to watch. You could tell there's passion on behalf of the brands that partner with. And I will say, I've never seen another kind of tech company or agency or whatever that has the types of glowing customer reviews that Tongal gets. It's a testament for sure.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. No, it's been really awesome to be on the show and really enjoyed the conversation.
This is the first episode that we've ever had mentions of Joe Walsh, Robert Evans, Tom Cruise.
And the Philly cheesesteak.
So we did cover a lot of ground. James, thanks so much. And thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for listening. You can check out what Tongal has going on over at their website, tongal.com. That's tongal.com. As always, look for a link to our blog post in the show notes of this episode, and check out monotype.com/podcast to read about all of our prior guests. If you've been enjoying our podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify to rate and review this episode. If you really like us, subscribe to the show and share us with your friends. Creative Characters is brought to you by Monotype. It is produced by Christopher Olin, Mia Sullivan, and Marie Tabarez. We'll be back soon with some more episodes. Take care, everyone.